Have you ever found yourself in a position where you are probably looking at your things to do and you are just not able to do anything about it and you feel like you are frozen? You know that, okay, these are the five things that I got to do and finish in the day, but you are distracted, you feel restless, essentially feeling overwhelmed, and by the end of the day, you feel that you have been not very productive. Welcome to the Unfold Learning podcast, where we will talk about an aspect that unfortunately gets trivialized and not talked about by sharing my experience with you. And if this resonates with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please do comment, probably, foster some sort of a conversation. Couple of weeks ago, there was a time where usually, like in my mornings, I listed about five things to do. Now, interestingly, when I listed those five things, I actually found myself that I was just staring at them, and essentially I was very, very distracted. So distracted that I kind of wasted about 15 to 20 minutes doing nothing. And it was at that point in time where I realized that there is something that is not right. And that's where I thought that, it's important to unfold what is really playing out. And why is it that I am not able to start off with anything, even though I know what is out there and what I really want to do? And essentially, that period of time, I was feeling restless, irritated, and like I said, I was going here and there in my head, right? Now, this is the point where it was important to ask the question, not that how could this happen to me, but why is this really happening? I realized that there are a lot of aspects that are playing out, which unfortunately neither has been told to me nor has been taught to me, and nobody kind of talks about it because the essence is not realized. And that's where I thought that maybe I can come in and in this check-in just talk about it, just express it. Maybe it resonates with you or maybe it doesn't, but this is something that I feel is important and essential for all individuals, irrespective of who they are, where they come from, and essentially those who are in their building years, who are in their foundational years, and not like me, someone who is in his mid 30s, right? When I was staring at those to do lists and I was like, you know, literally distracted, and I was thinking the end results of all of those five things. And while I was thinking those end results, I was thinking about, oh, what will these people think, what would the stakeholders think, what are the prerequisites that were required. And in a big way, I was distracted in my head. I was not able to really bring my focus into what is required to do. That is where I realized that there is such a huge gap in understanding the definition of a process. And that was my first hit when I said to myself that, boss, you really don't understand the process. Now, if you deep dive into this, like what is a process, right? So there will always be a point that you start with, and there will always be a point that you would end with. And right at the middle is where the process is involved. However, when I was looking at my to do list, I was jumping from A to the other point, B, and not really looking through or experiencing through the mid journey, that is the process. And that's a huge, huge gap. And essentially, I was jumping on to thinking things that either have not happened or things that are beyond my locus of control. But what was important for me to realize is what is in my locus of control, and that's just the process and engaging with the process and seeing through the process, right? Process matters. Now the question is, why is it not so obvious? Like, why did I have that tendency to jump to the end? Well, it is a function of a lot of things, and primarily it is a function of the context that I come from, of the conditioning that I've had, and essentially the circumstances that is valued around me, right? And it's very important to understand. Now, let's Go back in time and look at some examples, or also let's look around us, right? Now, essentially, the community that I come from, the geography that I come from, and maybe I'm trying to generalize this, but when you look at this from an Asian lens or a South Asian lens, there is that sense of competition, right? You are always told that you have to ace it. Are always told that you have to be the first, right? And that's where everything gets jeopardized. How often do we prioritize getting the best results versus prioritizing the way we are getting those results, right? I'll try and give an example. When I was studying during my school or even during my college, I used to make my daily timetables, right? And the intent behind those timetables was stemming from the fact that how fast could I complete a syllabus for a particular subject versus how I can spend time to get in depth of the concepts and understand. Let's take another example, the way we drive. There is this urgency, it's sometimes like a video game, like everybody is going from here and there and probably jumping over your head or coming at you, and sometimes it feels ridiculous, and I wonder, why is there so much of rush? What will it take for us to be in the lane, right? Now one could counter and tell me that, that's what we are known for, that's the jugaad, being resourceful, right? We are smart and we need to navigate our way. Agreed, but at what cost? The way we maneuver through traffic is an example of how much do we value a process. Even at workplace, right? How often do we choose to stay with the problem? Rather, we start getting into jumping into solving problems, and essentially we solve the symptoms and not the root cause of the problem. And we can talk at length about this, but trust me, that's what happens. And it's a vicious cycle. Like, you solve one thing and then the other generates, and then you solve that and then the other will generate, right? Why? Because there is that urge to finish it fast, there is that urge to get to that fast, and it all stems from that sense of competition, context, and the circumstances that we are in, which discounts the whole idea of valuing a process. Process is time consuming, agreed, but process is what will help us to be more resilient and to be more mindful of the smaller things and the nuances. And you know what the interesting part was, when I was staring at my to do list and I was feeling frustrated? It was actually just sticking to that point one and get started with it. Don't jump to the point five and think, oh, if all of these things happen, then what will happen? No, it was just about starting, it was just about doing. The process really helps us to understand the journey better, right? Our lives cannot be if statements. It cannot be a function of what we achieve and basis that we draw our happiness. No, it is the journey, right? Moving from one end of the tunnel to the other end of the tunnel, it's not only the two ends that are important, it's actually what is in between, and that's where the process lies. And the unfortunate part is, and this is where I feel a lot of discomfort, that one, we don't value process, we don't understand the process, we are in the urge to be the first, we are in the urge to get there first, we are surrounded with the idea of competition which is not required. And because of this, eventually we start glorifying things that are given. Like, we start glorifying questions like, what is the purpose of my life? Well, your purpose of your life is just to get things done that is at hand, the work that you do. As simple as that. If there is a conflict between two individuals, how often do those individuals value the process of having a conversation? Like, what is the journey that we value? Do we value the journey or do we value the end outcomes? Like, what if we tell our children that it doesn't matter what score you get. Do not even tell me about the score, but tell me the process that you used to achieve that score. How often does these conversation happen? How often does this conversation happen between employees or between teams or between managers that, hey, what is the process that you involved yourself to immerse and understand the problem better versus saying, how fast can you get me the solution? Why is this so much of an urgency? Why is that we need to be first at every point in time? Why do we have to be first? That's where I would want to leave you all with. If this resonates, do let me know. You can comment. I would love to hear some comments. I would love to engage in those conversations. And at the end of the day, I hope that I would have helped trigger some thoughts for you that you can integrate in your day to day lives. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling irritated, if you're feeling the tasks are daunting, do two things. One, tell yourself that you need to engage with the process, you need to see it through. And second is that just get started with that first thing. Give yourself that 2 minutes and just get started. And trust me, you will see a magic that you will experience in terms of resilience, in terms of growth, in terms of evolution, in terms of the joy that you will feel through the process, which is far, far, far exponential than what you achieve as an end milestone. That's my time. Thank you for being there at Unfold Learning Podcast.